Hello and welcome back to the beginner JavaScript tutorial series. In the past couple of tutorials we've been looking at if statements and we've been looking at testing different conditions in our programs using a range of operators, and we looked at how to use an if statement, a basic if statement, how to also specify multiple conditions using else if, and how to run code if any conditions haven't already been met using the else statement. So in this tutorial we're going to have a look at something called switch statements. And switch statements are like if statements, but they are much neater when you're working with many conditions. Okay, so in this little program we will check what city the user is from and then display a message based on that. And instead of actually asking for input and checking what city they're really from, I'm just going to set it in a variable, hard code it straight into a variable. Okay, so we can get straight into the switch statement. So I'll make a variable called city, and that will be equal to Sydney. Okay, so I'm hard coding this variable city, setting it to Sydney. All right. So the user's city is Sydney, but you could have a program that has a form where they enter it in, or they might select an option and they select what city they're living in. Okay. Then if we were using if statements, we could have something like if city is equal to Sydney, then display a message. Else if city is equal to Melbourne, then display a different message. Else if city is equal to Perth, display another message. Else, or otherwise, if none of those conditions have been met, then display a completely different message. Okay, but instead of using an if statement, we're going to use something called switch. Okay, so we start by using the switch keyword, and then we pop in the name of the variable, which in this case is city, so the variable that we're looking at. Then our curly braces. So enter down a few lines. All right. Remember, this is a kind of like an if statement, and if statements always have the code inside them indented. So we're going to indent here, and we're going to use a keyword called case. All right. So we'll specify the first case, and the first case is that the city could be equal to Melbourne. All right. And if that's the case, then we want to display a message using the document.write method, and that message might be something simple like you are from Melbourne. Okay, they already know that, we don't really need to tell them that, but this is the example we're going to use. Okay, then if that's the case and they are from Melbourne, then after displaying the message you are from Melbourne, we can then break this switch statement, and I'll explain what that means in a moment, but we'll put break at the end of each case. I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, then we can add another case, so using the case keyword, and this case is Sydney. Okay, remember the colon, enter down, intent, document.write, you are from Sydney. So far in the case that they're from Melbourne, it will say you are from Melbourne, and in the case that they're from Sydney, it will say you are from Sydney. Okay, and then again, break. And we'll add just a few more cases. So we might add Perth, from Perth. Okay, and break that as well. And maybe we'll add Brisbane. Stick with the big cities. So in the case here, Brisbane, we want to write this message. You are from Brisbane. Okay. Alright, then we add, let's just remember to add break there as well. Okay, And basically what the reason we use the break statement at the end of each case is basically so that the code runs efficiently. If you don't use the break at the end of this case, being Melbourne, then basically the program will keep checking through all the conditions, right? Even if a match has already been found. So even if the city was specified as Melbourne, and the switch statement came to this case and it checks if the city is equal to Melbourne and it's true. Even if that was true, it would keep checking through every single case until the switch statements end. Switch statement ends. Okay, so in this case, the city is Sydney. It would go down. It would say, no, it's not Melbourne. And it would get here and say, yep, it's Sydney. Even in that case, it would still go through and check the others. So it's not a very efficient way of running the program, but because we've added the break keyword, if the city was equal to Melbourne, it would print this message, you are from Melbourne, and then it would break the switch statement. So it would skip all of these other cases and just go straight to the end. Alright, so always add a break at the end of each case, and your code will run more efficiently. Okay, now what if the user is from none of these cities, they're from somewhere else? Well, we can add a default case. Okay, so we can add the default keyword and a colon, enter down, and here we can run code or display a message that will basically only run if none of these other conditions have been met, or they don't evaluate to true. So we could say something like, you don't live in a city I recognize, or I'm not sure where you're from. Okay, and then make sure the switch statement is closed off with that curly brace at the end. And then we can test this. So save and launch in Chrome. Alright, so at the moment it says you are from Sydney. Why is that? Because the variable city is equal to Sydney, goes through the switch statement here and checks through Melbourne, and no, city is not equal to Melbourne. It checks through Sydney, this case here, yes, city is equal to Sydney, so then it displays this message, you are from Sydney, and breaks the switch statement, just goes straight to the end of the program. Alright, if we change it to the variable to Brisbane, then save it, and we go back and run that in Chrome again, then it will say you are from Brisbane. But if we change this to another city that's not recognized, like Darwin, because we haven't specified Darwin in any of these cases here, and we save it and run that in Chrome, then it will say I'm not sure where you're from. And the reason that is because the city is set to Darwin, it goes through all of these cases. No, the city is not Melbourne, it's not Sydney, it's not Perth, it's not Brisbane. Okay, so none of these conditions have been met, so it will go to the default, which is to say I'm not sure where you're from. Okay, so that's basically how you use switch statements in a JavaScript program. A bit like if statements, but they're neater when you're working with many conditions. Remember to always add the break keyword at the end of each case so that your program runs efficiently, and use the default keyword to have another action or piece of code that will run if none of the conditions are met, or if none of these are true. Okay, so that's switch statements. Thanks for watching.